What is the scariest story you know that is true? In the 1930s near my hometown, a man killed his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 3 stepchildren, dismembered their bodies and hid them in the root cellar. My great-uncle and his father, my great-grandpa, were out hunting when their dog ran off barking. Uncle followed the dog and found a burlap bag. He opened it and found the head of one of the children. When he told us the story, he said he looked up, and the man was standing right in front of him, another burlap bag in his hands. His dad arrived, scared the guy away, and they reported the head to the local cops, who found the rest of the victims, and arrested the killer, who was hanged, a couple months later. My uncle only told us the story once, but after he died, we found all the newspaper clippings about the murders in a trunk under his bed. I think it must have haunted him his entire life, especially since one of the kids was his age. It's a bit of local history I grew up hearing about, but didn't realize my great-uncle was the one who found the bodies until I was a teenager, because he simply never talked about it except at one time. There was this guy who kept noticing little things around his apartment felt off. But one night, he set up a hidden camera, just to prove to himself he wasn't going crazy. When he checked the footage the next day, he saw this woman, an actual stranger, crawling out of a crawl space in his ceiling in the middle of the night. She'd been living up there for months, sneaking down when he was asleep or at work to eat and use his stuff. Oh yes, I remember this. It was in Kasuya, Japan. The woman was a homeless woman who had been living on the top shelf of his closet. News article here, for anyone interested. There's actually a really good novella based on this, called Nagasaki by Eric Fay. Back in the 90s, a couple kids went missing. About 4 or 5 days later, my dad was fishing one night, thought he heard a gator. Got his big Q-beam spotlight and pointed it toward the noise. It was a bloated dead body bobbing up and down in the water, eyes open and facing my dad. Turns out the kids had driven into the water by mistake, probably had been drinking. They found the other body a few hours later after my dad called it in. My dad was so traumatized that he never went night fishing again and honestly didn't fish much at all after that. Oh shit, it's the same with my granddad. Back in the 60s, Chinese girls, usually those that are no longer virgins, would commit after their boyfriends left them by tying a heavy rock to their ankles and threw it overboard into a local river so that they sunk with it and drowned. My granddad on my dad's side, that worked early in the morning as a fisherman, saw what he thought was a peculiar coconut in the water with long hair growing out of it. He used his paddle to scoop it up only to come face to face with a severely rotten head. Turned out the body has decayed at the bottom of the river and the rotten head separated from her neck and floated to the surface. A lady in my city tortured her older kids, a 13-year-old and 9-year-old, to death and stuffed them into her deep freezer for 2 years. For those 2 years, her younger kids had to walk by that freezer knowing their siblings were at the bottom of it. When she was caught, she said she had no regrets and that her children were demons. All over a delusion that the older kids were sexually abusing the younger ones. Yeah, reminds me of this other weirdo lady who kept birthing her brains out in her house and killing her newborns and stuffing them in her freezer. She was acting like there wasn't anything wrong with it when she was caught. She has like 6 bodies in her house. Crazy messed up. There was a similar case here in Korea with some French people. So, the husband had found the frozen fetuses, called the police, and the police did a thorough investigation. At first, they thought the husband was having an affair with the housemaid because the babies were genetically his. They asked him if his wife had been pregnant and he claimed she hadn't been. Well, apparently he was always away from his home. Long story short, the babies were theirs, and she had killed 3 babies in total. They did put her in jail in France, but from what I remember, the husband didn't get any time. They showed a diagram and apparently, some women have a body type where if their ribs are wide enough, and the uterus has a certain placement, the baby grows up in the rib cavity instead of out. That's how the dude was able to get off. This happened 3 months ago, but a friend of mine bought a small house in a housing complex at the start of the year. She often heard her neighbor and his girlfriend arguing loudly, as did the other homes around them. One afternoon she comes home from work to police and an ambulance in her cul-de-sac. She comes to find out that this neighbor had murdered his girlfriend. She tells the police she still heard him yelling 2 days prior. However, when the investigator came to officially interview her, he told her that the girlfriend had advanced decomposition to the extent that they couldn't get fingerprints from her. Keep in mind this was in winter time. Which means he had been yelling at a corpse for a while. Scary part is the police still didn't arrest him and he lived in the house until the girlfriend's brother evicted him since the home was in her name. What? Where is this? Why the police didn't arrest him? Not sure why he wasn't immediately arrested. I think they were still investigating, innocent until proven guilty, I guess. My country's, South Africa, justice system is also quite incompetent. My friend thinks it possible he got her hooked on drugs and she may have overdosed. However, he apparently told the investigator he wasn't home for the weekend and he just found her like that when he got back on the Monday. Which isn't possible since the neighbors heard him yelling at her on the Saturday morning. My great aunt woke up to her dog growling in the middle of the night. When she checked a window, a man in a ski mask was standing there and said, "Party time." She screamed she had a gun, and her dog went crazy barking until he ran off. She bought a gun after that. I can't even think about what would have happened to her if she didn't have her dog to warn her. The case of Clive Waring. He's a musician who contracted a virus that destroyed the part of his brain that forms new memories. He has anterograde amnesia, meaning his memory only lasts for about 7 to 30 seconds. He is constantly waking up for the first time, every single moment of his life. He keeps a diary, and it's filled with entries minutes apart, each one saying something like, 10:45 a.m., I am now awake, with all the previous entries crossed out because he has no memory of writing them. It's the true story of a man trapped in a never-ending moment, and the thought of that is scarier to me than any ghost story. There was this super eerie case in Lebanon involving a family of weirdos from a village called Kfershima. Neighbors had been whispering about them for years due to their reclusiveness and antisocial behavior, but it wasn't until last summer that the authorities broke into their property and found 5 dead bodies in different states of decay in a hidden locked room under the house. Turns out the eldest son had been quietly stashing his own deceased siblings and father down there since the 1980s, claiming it was a family ritual and that he was just fulfilling their wish to be buried at home. While some died of natural causes, one brother, George al-Fatah, had been killed by another sibling, Khalil, during the Lebanese Civil War. Khalil took his own life in 2000, and a baby girl named Marie died at 1 year old for reasons that remain unknown, but it's rumored that one of the brothers had killed her out of jealousy. The eldest brother, Christo al-Fatah, was living there with his senile, 90-year-old mother. He was arrested, the mother was sent to an elderly care facility and the bodies were finally given a proper burial. Such a creepy family, and the story was absolute nightmare fuel when it broke out. Not wanting to defend the cursed Adam family, but what charge they arrested Christo? Illegal burial, or he is being charged for the deaths? The reason the police broke into the property to begin with was because a neighbor caught him stealing cable wires and reported it. It turned out he had quite a history with theft, and several complaints had been made by others before, but it took a while for the authorities to take them seriously. This is Lebanon for you. When the bodies were coincidentally discovered, he was also charged with illegal burial. As for the deaths, it's rumored that he's the one who killed his sister. The mother stated that her daughter was perfectly healthy and she had no idea what happened to her all of a sudden. She woke up one day and found her dead. The girl was 1. It remains a rumor to this day, there's no solid evidence to back it up, so he wasn't charged. I'm assuming you mean ones we are kinda connected to in some way. So I'll go with one of those. I worked for a year or two at a chemical type company a long time ago, 90s I think? And they had a big announcement. The company wasn't doing quite as well as they'd hoped financially. One of the guys in the crowd was muttering how they'd better not be talking about layoffs. And, of course, that's exactly what they did. So the guy who was muttering apparently went straight out to the parking lot where his truck was and got his rifle out and was immediately swarmed by police, because they had always seen him as a bit of a concern, so they prepared for exactly that. Big thank you to whomever thought ahead that far, rather than just assuming it would be okay. This was before mass shootings were quite as popular as today. This is a lot of farsight. I have to assume he was pretty well known as a super sketch guy. Any idea if he intended to just kill himself, or go postal? They think he was headed back in to shoot other people. I grew up hearing about my great aunt that had taken a trip to China in 1937. She died 9 months before I was born, so I never heard firsthand about the trip, just my mom and grandma talking about how she had to be smuggled out of the country. I never really put 2 and 2 together until a few years ago when I decided to do some digging around in old newspapers. They got out right before the Japanese invaded. I found at least a dozen articles about their trip and it was fascinating. I also found articles about a man who had killed himself in my parents' basement back in 1912. It's crazy what you can find in old newspapers. They wrote about everything back then. You can wake up blind. Happened to me in 22. In short, I have a super rare disease called acute zonal occult outer retinopathy. Best they can guess, my body's immune system attacked my eye's immune system. Yes, they're separate, and ate chunks of my retinas. It's still doing so, but not quite as vigorously as it did before I started seeing the results, which manifested as a sudden inability to see through my contacts or glasses. Anyways, I can still see a little bit out of half of one eye at a strength of -11, but I woke up like that after 38 years of seeing 20/10 with contacts or glasses. Was definitely hard to adjust to. Oh, and since autoimmune loves to travel in packs, I now also have rheumatoid arthritis and psoriatic arthritis, and my diabetes is getting worse. Yay, I'm the queen of autoimmune. Back in 2006, when my older sister was moving to a new city for work, my parents and I helped apartment hunt for her. My sister found a really nice apartment in a nice locality which was absolutely perfect on paper. The residents were all working women, the landlady seemed super nice to my sister, and the location and rent were ideal. The only thing left to do was for my parents to meet the landlady and finalize the documents. However, after my mom met the landlady for the first time, she told us that she had a weird feeling about her, and asked us to keep apartment hunting. So that's what we did. Anyway, fast forward a year or so and we find out from the local newspaper that the landlady was into black magic and she had allegedly murdered some of the residents to use as sacrifices for her rituals. I wish I was lying. Till date, it is one of the most terrifying things I've read. Do you have a link to the news story? I am so interested. Unfortunately, no. I was recounting this story to a friend recently and went down a rabbit hole trying to find the article online, but I just couldn't find it. This incident happened in Bangalore in the year 2006-2007. I'm assuming the news coverage would have taken place in 2008-2009? I'm 100% sure this happened, but I'm unable to find a news article that talks about it, partially because there was another murder in a paying guest in 2024 and I can only find articles pertaining to that incident. I will keep looking for this, but if anyone else comes across this article, I'd like to see it as well. Apologies for not coming up with a source at the moment. It can be hard to find things if it happened pre-internet. When I was in high school in the 80s, we had a double murder. One classmate murdered two of his best friends in their homes, went to a third friend's home to kill him but he was away camping, then went to the house he grew up, chatted with the current owner about his happy memories there, then killed himself on the front lawn. I've tried to find news articles about it, but the only thing I could find was a picture of my ex-boyfriend that ran in the paper with a caption saying that they'd been friends and he was shocked. I remember the article he was interviewed for, but can't find it anywhere. I'm sure I could find a lot in physical archives and microfiche, but if you just rely on the internet it's like it never happened. Sunshine Skyway Bridge disaster in 1980. Imagine riding along a bridge when it's foggy out and then driving over a ledge to your death in the waters below because a freighter crashed into and took out a giant portion of the bridge. Yikes, similar accident happened in Sweden in 1980 in the middle of the night in winter. A truck managed to stop just before the edge and was trying to flash his headlights for cars on the other side, but they kept going over. The boat that caused the accident also tried shooting emergency flares, causing one truck to stop briefly but continuing and going into the water. The Nutty Putty Cave tragedy still gives me chills. A guy named John Jones got stuck exploring a narrow section of the cave in Utah in 2009. He was trapped headfirst, wedged so tightly that even rescue teams couldn't free him. He stayed like that for over 24 hours before he died, still talking to rescuers and praying in his final hours. They eventually sealed the cave permanently with his body inside. Knowing he was alive, conscious, and waiting for death in total darkness is one of the scariest real stories I've ever read. In my early 20s, my wife and I had a goal of climbing all of the 14,000-foot peaks in Colorado. We would typically hike up a decent portion of the peak the night before, set up a tent and camp out and summit the next day. We were climbing Crestone Needle in August 2014 and set up camp before the tree line ended. We were in a remote wooded area near a creek that was raging pretty good at the time. No other campers around, no hikers seen going up or down. Super quiet and peaceful. We cooked dinner over the fire and went to bed early. I woke up around 1 a.m. with the hair standing up on the back of my neck. The only thing I could hear was the creek roaring and the wind blowing. I remember feeling really uneasy, which was unusual because we camped out a lot and were very used to being out in the wilderness. I decided to get up and exit the tent. Immediately upon stepping out of the tent, I saw the outline of a man about 50 yards from our campsite. He was just standing still staring down at our camp. Yelled up at him, but didn't get a response. I poked my head into the tent to wake my wife up, and when I looked back for the man, he was gone. My wife and I talked about it and agreed that it was probably an early hiker who was starting their summit push early. Both of us felt uneasy, and neither of us were able to go back to sleep. I laid in the tent for about another 45 minutes wide awake. I decided to get back out of the tent to have a look around. I stepped out of the tent and walked around still feeling a little uneasy. Didn't see anything and still couldn't hear shit. Started going back towards my tent, and when I turned to my left, I saw the guy again. This time he was very close. Maybe 20 feet or so from our tent behind some brush. I yelled at him again and started running his direction. He took off and I lost sight of him. I got my wife out of the tent, we got all of our stuff packed up and we left. The 2-hour walk back to the car in the pitch black was honestly the most terrifying part of it all. Crestone, not surprising. That place is beautiful, but absolute cult and crazy person central. That's where the cult of Mother God had their idiocy. There is a really good podcast called Up and Vanished about a disappearance, likely murder, there, and tons of historic news articles about incidents in the region. I go hiking there periodically, but will not go unarmed. My cousin died unexpectedly in 2016 of what we assume was an extremely aggressive cancer. He left behind his wife and 2 boys, aged 2 and a newborn. A couple years later, the wife entered a relationship with another guy who, by all accounts, was a stand-up character for both her and the boys. In 2021, the wife died of what everyone assumed was COVID. The boyfriend had her cremated extremely quickly and offered to take full custody of her sons. It soon came out that he had been abusing the boys, physically and sexually. He skipped town. The boys were adopted by my cousin's relative, who brought them to see a child psychologist. When the therapist built enough rapport to ask the boys about the day their mother died, the boys proceeded to play act one person smothering another with a pillow. Meanwhile, the boyfriend was charged with the rape of a minor relative, but the trial was delayed on a technicality, and then dropped when the victim recanted. Last I heard, late 2021, he's an assistant pastor at church in New Hampshire. Update, his full name is Marshall Corrado, possible middle name of Neil. It appears that he is now living in Southington, Connecticut. Previous associated address includes Laconia, New Hampshire, where all this originally happened. There is no current association with a church that I can find. Someone with the same name was scheduled to appear at the Belknap County Superior Court in January of this year, but no updates on legal status since that time. Update 2, here's a YouTube video featuring him and his ex-wife on some religious podcast, had it confirmed by a relative willing to talk about it. Update 3, the accuser has not recanted and a trial date has officially been set for September 22nd.